Hey guys, welcome back to Mimir. Today is a very special episode for me. It is episode freaking 100. I have been thinking for months about what kind of episode I wanted to make for this. Like, did I want to do top 10 lessons I've learned from founders or advice to early stage founders based on 100 conversations? And to be honest, I feel like I could do those types of episodes any day of the week, and in my heart, it wasn't the kind of episode I wanted to make to mark this occasion. 100 episodes is a milestone I'm really proud to have hit, especially in a field where it's well known that most people quit after the first 6. But frankly, I always knew that I would hit this milestone, and I don't say that to sound arrogant. Like, I just genuinely always knew that I would get here because I refused to quit. Uh, there was no other alternative option for me. I started Mimir 3 years ago, and I had just moved to San Francisco. I didn't have a full-time job, so I was walking dogs and pet sitting to pay the bills, and real ones have probably heard this story about 50 times, but I was going through a bit of a life change at the moment. Like, I had just finished living abroad in China, working in project development. And so I thought I would get a job in tech in the Bay. But after rejection, I figured the universe was trying to tell me to just stop applying for quote unquote jobs and instead really slow down and think critically about what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I started to wonder, what was I passionate about? What did I want to bring to the world outside of being an employee, outside of just another job? And I knew the answer was to start my own business. But the problem was that I didn't have an idea for a business at the time. So while I waited for the proverbial coconut to drop down from the sky and hit me over the head, I figured I might as well set future me up for success by learning as much as I possibly could in the interim. So I became a voracious podcast listener and book reader about business, and most were fantastic, but they were all also very high level. They glossed over the questions that I needed the answers to, like, how do you find a manufacturer? How do you do customer research when you have no customers? And how do you plan a launch or generate interest in your product with no social media following? It was all questions around, like, really tactically, how do you go from idea to thriving business? And that's when Vamir was born. The purpose of the podcast was to simply interview successful founders so I could learn the skills, tools, and attitude required to start a business, but also then share that with other aspiring entrepreneurs who, like myself, needed something tailored to their stage of business. And at the time, truly, all I had was a dream and an intense work ethic to make it happen. I was building the podcast from my first San Francisco apartment, and looking back on those days, I just remember them being so beautiful. Like, I see these just bright blue, sunny skies, lots of walks outside, and spending an absurd amount of time chasing a dream. I was hunting down guests to interview, I was documenting and making social media content, building a business plan, and all the other things I thought it took to make your dreams a reality. I was drunk on passion and thus incredibly delusional. Like, on my desk at my bay window, I had this hot pink sticky note, which sort of served as a manifestation mantra, you could say. And it read, 1 year from now, I'll have 100,000 followers on TikTok and Amir will be paying my rent. Like, girl. Like, seeing that out loud, it obviously sounds ridiculous, and it is, and, like, spoiler alert, that didn't happen. Actually, a year into building, after overdrafting my bank account on a vacation and profusely sweating bullets about that, I ended up getting a full-time job because I just, like, really couldn't afford to live in the city like that. But don't think that me getting a full-time job all of a sudden made this, like, delulu mindset go away, because I even started my job going into being like, "Oh, no worries, like, I'll be out in a year." But 2 years later, I'm still there. But I think more importantly, 2 years later, I'm still doing the podcast. When I started to make this episode, like, you know, thought that with 100 episodes automatically comes a bunch of other things. Millions of downloads, ad revenue, a podcast network deal. But life doesn't always work out like that. And so you're probably thinking to yourself as you're listening, well, gee, Maddie, like sounds like it didn't work out for you. And from certain perspectives, I think that's probably true. Honestly, the question, what was it all for, is one I've asked myself a billion times. Truly, half the reason I didn't quit years ago on this podcast was simply blind faith. In my deepest depths, I believed that something good would come from this experience. And at the very least, I wanted that to be true more than anything in the whole world. So I just kept my head down and I kept working. But somewhere along the way, I think I started to lose a plot a little bit. Like I was impatient and I thought that if I didn't have an idea for a business this far down the line, then maybe that was the universe's way of saying the mirror was the idea. So I followed that path and I truly gave it my best shot. And in a way, all that work has absolutely paid off. I'm a top 5% globally ranked business podcast, period. That is a real statistic. You can look it up. And to me, like, that's no small feat. That's kind of a big deal and it's kind of a sexy number. And I've had 100 episodes, which is conversations with founders from all types of industries. That's a lot of wisdom to digest. And through those conversations, I've made incredible connections. It's granted me access to an amazing network of founders who are out here doing the same thing that I am, which is basically just stumbling in the dark, pushing through doubt and confusion, hoping to land on something great. I want to give a major shout out here to my girls in Canada that I've interviewed, Maddie Sopri, Mel Grouds, Michelle Choi, Elena Luciani. After interviewing them, I found out that they were hyping up my podcast in Canada to other founders. It was truly like a surreal feeling knowing that somebody else was out there talking about what I was building. I think as founders, it often feels like it's you against the world. But through Mimir, I've learned that it's really just you against your own negative thoughts. And making connections with other founders is the antidote to that. It is one of the most soul filling things you can do because there are things that only you guys understand. You ask them the questions that you're scared to ask others. You can bounce ideas off of them in a way that AI can't replicate. And you can lean on them in times of challenge and hardship. And on that same vein, I want to shout out Rebecca Mazzara here in SF. She was my first like local founder that I interviewed, and connecting with her on this podcast and in real life has been such a privilege. Like I love going to her events and supporting her brand. It feels really like the happy tears emoji personified. And I know that I'm going to message her, and if I ever needed her, she would do the same for me. And finally, one of the other most incredible things that happened over the last few years on this podcast was being approached by Eric Melka, the co-founder of The Art of Shaving. I literally almost deleted the email from his team because I thought it was spam. I thought like no way someone that big would want to be on my podcast. But sure enough, it happened. And I remember finishing that interview. It was after my 9 to 5, and I was like in the interview and I was just watching the sunset, and all of a sudden like the background was getting darker and darker and I was like, "Oh my god, this looks so unprofessional." But I left the interview hoping to God I made a good impression. And to this day, who knows? But regardless, it was my first big brand interview and it felt really validating to have someone like that on the podcast. It taught me also that like value doesn't always equal numbers, right? Like here I was, a relatively small podcast, but Eric and his team saw something valuable in me. And I attribute that value to the 50 some odd episodes that came before it. Because I kept pushing and I kept focusing on the mission and I kept delivering great interviews, I was able to secure something amazing. And this is not a new concept. Like we see this all the time with content. You see content creators being like, I'm a small creator, but I still get big brand deals. And I think it just comes down to reps, right? Like consistency, I've learned, is the only way to outgrow imposter syndrome and knowledge gaps. I remember episode 37 with James McKay, the founder of Venn. James and I had a conversation about the future of tech, founder mentality, aligning incentives, and the structure of modular work. And I took that interview from my parents' house in Park City, and I was literally sitting at the edge of my seat the whole time because the conversation was so fascinating. It was the kind of conversation I'd always dreamed of having. But it was also the first time that I felt like I had valuable thoughts to contribute to the conversation beyond just natural curiosity. In the show notes for that episode, I wrote, quote, "In my humble opinion, this was the first real thought leadership conversation I've had on the podcast," unquote. And if it wasn't for the 36 episodes before that and the learning that occurred in between them, I would not have felt that way. The experience of showing up regardless of embarrassment or fear rewards you with confidence. Because consistency isn't something that's automatically granted to you. To me, like in my mind, it is inextricably linked from discipline, and discipline is something that needs to be built. If you had asked me 3 years ago whether I was a disciplined person, I probably would have said, like, "Sort of?" Question mark, maybe? I've been the girl who had a lot of ideas and, like, had a lot of starts, like, I tried being a fashion influencer, like, way back in the day. I had this blog called The Sad Wallet. I was really inspired by Chiara Ferragni and The Blonde Salad. Okay, I tried being an author, like, I published 2 books, and I even went into the second one being like, "Gosh, I learned a lot from the first one. I bet this one's gonna be it," and, of course, that never turned into a career. Bottom line is I've tried a bunch of things that didn't turn into what I thought they would, and here's what nobody tells you about discipline. Like, yes, you have to force yourself to do hard things when your brain is screaming at you to take the easy road, but the hot tea is that, like, you never reach a point where it gets easier. Discipline is what happens when you keep showing up long after the initial high of the new thing has worn off. Every founder I've interviewed when talking about how they got to where they are today has said something along the lines of, well, I just kept going." And I kinda used to hear that as advice, right? You'd be like, "Oh, well, like, when times you're tough, just keep pushing through and, like, keep going." But I really think that that's more of a prescription now, where it's like you you just show up to the thing every day, and then one day you might take a breather, turn around, look back, and be like, "Holy shit, I've come a really long way." And I've spent the last 3 years going above and beyond, doing things I didn't need to do. Like, I have a full-time job, I don't need to be sitting here. But there I was, batching podcasts and social media content before trips, creating artwork, emailing and networking for guests, teaching myself new tools, tinkering with the recording process, learning how to grow online, refining the efficiency of getting posts out with good quality, and so much more. If nothing else, this podcast has taught me that I am disciplined. And originally, when I was writing this episode, I honestly, like, that didn't even occur to me. I did not even consider that. It was my fiance who pointed it out. And hearing that I was inspiring him fills my heart in a way that's really difficult to articulate. He reminds me often that I can do hard things, and if I can do this for 3 years, then I can do anything. It still kind of blows my mind that he saw what I couldn't see, for myself, like, that something was being built in me while I was so busy trying to build something else. And I guess it's hard to see when you're in the weeds, the day to day, and buried by doubt about whether it's gonna work out or not. But sitting here, I would definitely say that these last 100 episodes didn't end up where I had initially imagined they would. But also, I guess, in a way, starting the podcast did exactly what I had intended it to do. In preparation for this episode, I went back and watched my 1 year solo episode on YouTube. And at the beginning, I was like, ooh, I can feel the nerves. I can feel the imposter syndrome coming through the screen. But simultaneously, I felt a sense of admiration and love for the version of me that was out there doing the thing and trying. Like, I was watching it being like, "Oh, look at her go. She's doing it. She's she's trying." And if you go back and watch it and you can get past the initial cringe, I think you'll actually find some really good advice in there. One of the things I said in that episode was, quote, "As a business owner, love your ideas, nurture them, feed them, but don't get too attached. Just go until you can't go anymore and then move on to the next." Unquote. I had no idea sitting there at the mic at year 1 that just 18 months later, I'd step away from the tech startup I was co-founding. That after 3 years of podcasting, I'd realized Mimir wasn't going to be the business I wanted it to be, and that this year I'd start my very first skincare company called Kelly Beauty, or just Kelly for short. I am so beyond excited for this next venture. And, like, by no means am I saying that the podcast is going anywhere. I don't think I'll ever stop wanting to help early stage founders navigate their experience. And I'm going to keep writing and recording just the same. But at the same time, I am pouring everything I've got in me into Kelly. The idea for this company, I guess, has been inside of me this whole time, but it took 100 episodes for me to pull it out and bring it into the open. And I know I haven't officially done a deep dive about that here on the podcast. I've kind of been hinting at it and just sort of like subtly dropping it over the last couple episodes. So allow me to explain. Kelly is a skincare company for girls with reactive skin who are sick of not being able to trust beauty. Personally, I've always had really sensitive skin. It started in high school where I would get full blown allergic reactions to makeup and skincare products. And those reactions would often turn into months long eczema recovery. So I've been forced into clean skincare. I would say that I care about what I put on my skin, but if I had a choice, like, obviously, I wouldn't wanna be relegated to that side of the shelf, and for me, it's gotten worse with age, and so I'm really having to be very conscientious about what ingredients I'm using, like, really, I have to use stuff that's either, homeopathic or, like, literally designed for babies, but that's really frustrating because I wanna participate in beauty. I wanna get the facial, I wanna wear the sheet mask, and I wanna go to Sephora and try all the things, but I just simply can't. And I'm also really sick of going to Sephora and not knowing what any of the ingredients mean, even if it's considered quote unquote clean. So that's why I'm building something different. I wanna build something with legible ingredients, killer packaging, something is fun, but also something that's clear as day. Like skincare should be simple, but it doesn't mean that it has to be boring. And I'll have so much more to share on Kelly soon, but for now, just know that it's coming. If you want to be more up to date on the day to day of how the building is going, make sure you subscribe to my Substack. I share a ton about building over there. But if you guys want some more solo episodes on that, like also please let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to make those as well. But ironically, just 2 episodes ago, I was sitting across from Connie Lowe, who's the co-founder of Three Ships Beauty, which I talk about a full circle moment. Because for the last 90 something episodes, I've been interviewing from the outside looking in. I was an interviewer who wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never felt truly part of the crew, but I am now. And I think that the content here is going to get even more rich with my own experience folded into the mix. It's one thing to sit across from someone and learn about their experience. Like, you can empathize in the same way I think you would sitting across from a friend who's telling you a story. But it's another thing entirely to empathize because you have lived in the same experience. Like, it comes from a different place where the feelings are embodied and it's more lived in that way. I want to share a line from a song that's been playing in my head while I was writing this episode. And it goes, quote, "At last, she knew what the agony had been for." It is a line from the song The Manuscript by Taylor Swift, and when I was listening to it the other day, as the melody sunk into my bones and I sung along to the lyrics, I realized that it fit perfectly with this episode. The song is about a person who wrote a manuscript about all the crazy shit that happened in their life, and when the author watched the movie adaptation of that story, she realized that that's what it had all been for that moment right then and there. And that's how I feel right now. I've worked hard over the last episodes. I've spent countless hours thinking, planning, grinding. I spent years feeling like a failure, feeling embarrassed, feeling doubtful. I had days at least once a month where, for a while there, I would cry in my car because I just felt like it was all going nowhere. And I was putting myself through so much for what? But now I know what all the agony had been for. It was so I could get to this place where I'm 100 episodes deep and wiser because of it and a freaking founder. Something I've asked every single founder I've interviewed is, knowing what you know now, would you choose this path all over again? And to this day, I've never heard someone say no. It has always been a resounding 100% emphatic yes. And I agree with them. Like, I wouldn't trade any of the last 3 years, not the dog walking, not the embarrassment, not the tears, not the version of me at episode 2 who thought she had it figured out, not the version of me at episode 50 who wondered if I would ever feel truly proud about a podcast with no ad revenue, and not the version of me 4 months ago who didn't know what was coming next. All of it had to happen exactly the way that it did for me to be sitting here right now. And it makes me quite emotional, actually, to say all that out loud because you never know where life is going to take you. And frankly, we don't have as much control as we think we do. We're all stumbling around in the dark forest, hoping we're on a path that leads towards our dreams. And really, the only thing we can control is taking the next right step. And what I mean by the next right step is simply following your gut and trusting your instincts. When I started Mimir, I had a plan. I had an insane timeline, but I didn't quit when the plan didn't work out on the timeline that I had set because something in me told me to keep going. Whether that something was stubbornness, fear of looking stupid, or frickin' God's plan, like I literally didn't care. I just listened to it and I didn't quit. And kind of brings me to amor fati, it means the love of fate in Latin. It's a concept I've talked about often on the podcast. And of course, things make sense in hindsight, right? Like love of fate. We can accept the challenges once we're on the other side of them. But I've started to see amor fati as a mantra for the present and almost a de stressor for the future. If everything will make sense in hindsight, then I'm already doing what I need to be doing today to make that situation occur. So even if it seems hard or terrible in this moment, I know that it's leading me towards a fate that I love. And just the other day, I was doing a screening call for a potential podcast guest, and it was so perfectly timed, I had to laugh. He said that in his founder journey, everything bad turned into something good. Nothing bad ever happened to him, it all really happened for him. And as founders, we deal with so much crap, like outside of just the day to day grind of what it takes to build a business. I think you put yourself out there on social media, you have customers who tell you that your product is shit. Like you just deal with a lot. But I think every ounce of pain becomes ground that you've gained. Rejection directs you to things that are the right fit. Silence teaches you to listen to yourself and project that voice. Doubt becomes curable with faith, and faith is what keeps you pushing. And in pushing, you make it true. In and of itself, entrepreneurship is an exercise in manifestation, dare I say, faith. You couldn't find the product or service you wanted, so you made one. You didn't want to work a traditional job, so you became a full time founder. You wanted financial freedom, you grew your business. You wanted to improve your surroundings, you disrupted an industry. You created a reality you wanted. It is that simple. And there's a gift that comes from being a founder. Even though I'm 5 days into my official founder journey, I can understand and appreciate that gift. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but I truly do feel an immense sense of gratitude. Like, what a gift it is to be witnessing myself create my own reality. And what a gift it is to be doing it alongside every other founder who's in the exact same boat, building ourselves and by extension, our desired realities one day at a time. Before I wrap the episode, I want to take a last moment to thank every single person who is following the show on whatever platform you are listening to. I am so appreciative of your continued support. And honestly, you guys have, at the end of the day, been what's pushed me to not quit. I would always think but what if somebody found this podcast helpful? What if somebody's listening right now and needs more episodes? What if an episode helps them take the leap and their product becomes incredibly important and impactful in our generation? I felt a responsibility to continue to show up for you guys. And so I really hope that this podcast has been helpful or at the very least entertaining. With every ounce of my being, thank you for letting me be part of your routines, your commutes, your spark of inspiration or motivation. And if I could, I would jump out of the speaker and give every single one of you a major hug. You stuck with me through the times when I was unsure and the formats that didn't work, the production gaps when life got in the way, or the awkwardness of the early days. I see every single one of you, and I am so, so appreciative. And I know I said that I had one more thing and that was going to be the last thing that I wanted to talk about, but I have one more thing. You may or may not notice that my mirror looks a little different today. Back in January, this wonderful woman on Substack, her name is Hillary Archer, reached out to me. She writes a Substack called The Red Thread, and she's a creative brand strategist, and she's starting a new content stream where she would audit brands, and she wanted to know if I'd be willing to be one of the first few that she audited. So, of course, I said yes. And what came from that brand audit was very eye-opening. I sort of knew that the brand needed a refresh since I had basically DIY'd everything on Canva and Squarespace myself 3 years ago. But what Hillary showed me was how much of a disservice I'd been doing to myself by not addressing the problem sooner. So I knew this year was the time for a brand refresh. And with the addition of the Substack, things were just kind of feeling disconnected. And it was time to give them both the love they deserve. So today, alongside this episode, Mimir is launching its new brand, which, what perfect timing to launch this new brand after 100 episodes. And All the links are down below to go and check out the new brand. But I worked with the incredible Lauren Huxtable from Paradox Designs for this brand refresh, and I'm absolutely blown away by the work that she's created. I truly could not have accomplished anything near the work that Lauren has been able to produce, and I knew that about myself, which is why I reached out to her. But I am so glad I was able to meet Lauren and work with her for this project. I'm incredibly proud of what we've accomplished, and if you guys think it looks good, just wait until you see what Lauren is cooking up for Kelly because she is absolutely bananas. So go check out the brand down below and let me know what you guys think in the comments. Finally, for all the founders who are listening right now, I hope you found some solace in knowing that the process isn't linear. It is not always clear while we're deep in it, and that's okay. The most important thing you can do is show up. I implore all of you to keep going, to keep showing up and trying, even if it doesn't make sense or it doesn't feel like it's working. I promise something good will come from it. Just remember, everything bad becomes something good. Thank you guys so much again for listening. I cannot wait to be here again in another 100 episodes. I wonder what Mimir will look like. I wonder what Kelly will look like. I wonder what I will be like. But I will be sharing all of that in the meantime. So make sure you're following the podcast. And if you want more, come hang out on the Substack. She also got a Stunning Queen refresh, looking very crispy. And there's always great content over there. But until next time, I will see you guys later.